This is a Gilbriar Productions video by me, Paula Stone.
I'm Kathy Lyles, and welcome to my place. We have 4 acres here in the Texas Hill Country. We moved here in 2000, and I began working in earnest on planting natives and so on about 16 years ago. So what you'll see is after about 16 years. So starting here, I want to tell you about the Nolina texana. There's 2 Nolinas. I'm sorry, it's Sotal. Excuse me. This is a Sotal. I tried about 4 different plants here, and they just couldn't take the heat, the drought, and the juniper roots would come under the sidewalk and suck all the moisture. And so I put this guy in, and it was perfect. Perfect. So he worked out really, really well. Sotal. And along the walkway, I have mealy blue sage because it's deer proof. Now this front of the property is deer country, I call it, because they have free access and they eat most everything. So I have learned over the years what they absolutely won't eat, and then maybe what they're not quite so fond of, and that's the only thing I plant here. So the mealy blue sage is deer proof. They won't eat it. And so I've got it, I let it go wherever. I've planted it out there, I've planted it, or actually sometimes I plant it, but most of the time I just fling seeds. That's the way I plant things. I fling seeds and they come up because they're native and this is their environment. The first tree you'll see here is the Texas redbud. And I have 14 Texas redbuds. It's taken me years, but I've got 14, and it's a glorious sight in March to see 14 Texas redbuds blooming. This one I bought. All the others I've grown from about this big. I guess the birds, there's a part of my property, the birds must have been feeding on redbud trees, because I've got under one huge juniper, I had 75 baby redbuds. I pulled out about 30 of them, and I looked at them the other day. There's probably about 50 left. And they're kind of big now, so they're kind of hard to dig out. But anyway, so I pulled them out and grew them for several years in nursery pots. And I do that with all my things, especially trees. Put them in 1 gallon and then bump them up to 5 gallon and keep them in there for sometimes 3 years. So they have a good root system because there's so much competition out here. All these juniper roots want the water, the oaks. So I make sure that I plant bigger things. 4 inches in quarts don't work so much. And so, and then I have to be very patient. It takes years for a tree in this environment, not in town in soil that looks like potting soil, but in this environment, it takes years for trees to establish. 3 years or so, and then you'll start seeing growth and so on. So it does take a while, but then they just really take off. This I have throughout the property. I have butterfly larval plants. Those are the plants that the female lays eggs on. So sometimes they're not pretty plants. That's not why I'm growing them. I'm growing them so the female will lay eggs on them and the caterpillars will eat the leaves. So pretty is not the thing. It's does a butterfly use it? However, in this case, it's both. This is the Texas milkweed or white milkweed, and it's the most ornamental of our native milkweeds of this area. There might be some in East Texas that I'm not familiar with, but it's got the pretty white flowers, and so it could go in a flower garden. So it'd be pretty, plus it would be there to feed not only monarchs, but queen butterflies. The monarchs are only here in the early spring as they migrate. It's too hot here in the summer, so they've migrated north to the northern U.S. But the queen butterflies are here all year. So there are other butterflies that can use it. So over here, I want to point out, I will be pointing out some things that you have to be careful of and things I'm sorry I did. This is Mexican feathergrass, and it's beautiful with the wind blowing in it. But it spreads like crazy. I had 3 along here, and the reason I planted it is because it's deer proof. But look how many I have pulled up yesterday. They go everywhere. If I didn't do anything, they'd be coming up all over, and I don't want a whole front yard of Mexican feathergrass. So you kind of have to keep up with it. If you're going to plant it, just keep up with it. And I've been gone so much of the last year that I didn't keep up with it. I did prior to this year. So, and this is a big tooth maple. It took many years for it to get going. I planted it for fall color. And it's supposed to have some shade, so I kind of planted it over here. These junipers have grown closer than I would like, but anyway, it's finally healthy and happy. It will have fall color some years. It's that way with almost everything. Some years are good, some are spectacular. I mean, with all the fall bloomers, and some are meh. And it depends on temperature at that time, rainfall, just different variables that you really don't have control over. It's the same with the prairie flame leaf sumac over here. There's the small one I planted and the one behind it that was there. And I preserve what's here. If it's not in the way, like whatever was in the way of this walkway got yanked out. But otherwise I leave things. And those guys can have the most spectacular fall color, orange to red. It's just beautiful, but not every year. So, just appreciate it on the years that it does do that. Here's another red bud. And these red buds I've found on the properties I told you, and they were like this big. And so there's 14. So there's that one, this one. I'll point them out as we go. This is a Mexican plum. And I grew a couple of them. I've got 3 from this big, same thing, up into this big, and then put them in the ground. And it is the first tree to bloom in the spring, February. It's gorgeous, white, covered in white. So this is a February bloomer, and the redbud is a March bloomer. So you already know you can have a gorgeous February with Mexican plum, and then with trees, and then the redbuds in March. And so it's kind of neat to stage the bloom like that. Make sure you have something going every month. And also, the twist leaf yucca. Okay, so yuccas maybe aren't people's favorite thing, but let me tell you, in the dead of winter, it's an awfully pretty sight. It's green, green, green. And the same with the agarita. Maybe not something you would go buy at the nursery and plant, but if you have it, preserve it. If it's in the way and you're going to be brushing up against it, okay. But these things, they don't bother anybody. But they're beautiful in the winter. They're here, green. And these things, especially in the winter, this one's awfully pretty right now, but in the winter, it's gorgeous. So it was kind of funny. I only had yuccas on this side of the sidewalk. There weren't any over there, and there weren't any out there. So I started digging them up, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 over here now that I planted. Again, for winter, there's plenty going on in the spring, in the summer, and even the fall. But winter, not so much. So now I've got 7 beautiful yuccas, greenery in the winter. So winter presents, I think they call it. So if you're not a yucca fan, you just look at this beauty. I just think they're beautiful. Look at that. Now they're prickly. Yes, if you bump into them, they will draw blood. You don't want them by your walkway, but that's gorgeous. That's gorgeous. And green and all year, evergreen. Lots of value. This is Texas persimmon, and there are hundreds of them on the property. But again, I just leave them. I haven't done anything to that. I think it's rather pretty. It produces persimmons the size of a marble, maybe a little bit bigger. They are edible, but they've got 3 big seeds in them, so very, very little meat. It's almost like you're just sucking on the juice. You don't get much out of it. If you were starving, you'd have to eat a few hundred to get some nutrition. But anyway, they are good. They turn purple, and they're ripe when they're purple. This is an escarpment black cherry, and I have 3, and I found them all on the property. Birds planted them for me. That's a lot of my trees, the birds planted, but in an odd location or way back in the back. So I dug them up, put them in pots, grew them for years, and then put them in the ground when they had a good root system. So this guy was probably 3 inches tall, and he's doing well. So when he was about 6 feet tall, I was walking past him, and there was this really funky looking caterpillar on it. and very ugly caterpillar. But I remembered, and I also knew that escarpment black cherry was a larval for a butterfly. So I went inside and checked. Sure enough, it's the red spotted purple. And so I cut the branch and put it in a container. I have containers to raise butterflies in, and kept putting fresh branches in until it went into chrysalis. And one morning I came out and there was the beautiful red spotted purple. So this process is going on, but the females lay the eggs on the new growth. So if there are any caterpillars or anything going on, it's going to be at the very tip. And now it's so tall, I'll never see it happening. But it's kind of nice to know that there are the things here that they need. And I've spent all these years planting and planting and planting for butterflies and birds and wildlife. So anyway, so it's doing quite well. And it's a beautiful tree with pretty white flowers, kind of drupes. I don't know the technical name of flowers. And the bark is awfully pretty too. Look at that trunk of that tree. Isn't that gorgeous? I guess that's typical of cherries. So, but no edible cherries. People always ask me, "Oh, can you eat the cherries?" They do the same thing about the plums. Can you eat the plums? So, no, these are ornamentals. Over here, when I moved here, started working on the place. I read an article about if you want to grow things that deer like to eat, take an area, surround it with rosemary because they hate it, and then you plant what you want inside. So I tried that. It absolutely did not work. I would watch deer walk between the rosemary. I still do. So I don't know. I found that deer are different place to place. I have a friend, and the deer would leave her purple coneflower alone and her lantana, and they devoured by. So I don't know what the deal is. But this is another deer-proof, and it's the end of its bloom season. This is prairie verbena. And here's what you do, and I would do it sooner if I had been here more. You deadhead, take these spent flowers. See, this was covered in flowers, and they have the seeds on them, and cut them off. Do it sooner than this, and then it'll keep blooming because the plant. And then I just take these and kind of throw them elsewhere so that next year I'll have them all over. The plant will know that it's produced enough seed and stop blooming. If you foil it and clip the seeds off, then the plant, wants to reproduce, so it will put out more flowers. So if you want more flowers, you deadhead, cut off the blooms when they're done, before they go to seed. See, here's another one. I'll get it and chop it off, and then it might produce a few more flowers. Here's the mealy blue sage in bloom. Up at the side, as we first started, that one was kind of done. This one still has some color, although its most spectacular time is springtime. And here we are, and is it July today? I think so. So, so it's April, May. It's spectacular time. Here they are when they're spent. And so there's seeds in these. So when you want more plants, just clip those off and then take them where you want. And I just fling them, and you'll have more. Over here are the three shrubs are Texas sage or cenizo. And several years ago, I was working out here in the winter, and it was barren because all of these perennials had died to the ground. And I thought, wow, this looks like a barren landscape. So I said, I need evergreen. So I planted those three, and they finally took hold and are doing well. So that I have something in the winter time. And also the grasses are there in the winter. So if you have deer, so you want deer proof, you've got cenizo and you've got grasses. There's two things to start with. Mexican bush sage, which is not a native, but I'll put adapted plants out here that aren't natives because of the deer. I have so few choices. And so, but in the wintertime, I'll have the cenizo and the grasses. I added some Lindheimer's muley over there because this looks so good in the winter. And this is Gulf muley, has pretty pink purple flower stalks in the fall. And so, it's not your formal city landscape, but it's pretty and it works, and the deer leave it alone. So more Mexican bush sage because the deer don't eat it. And this I just pulled out. from the rocks. So I like my rocks to be tidy. You know, if you had seen it yesterday, last week, you wouldn't know that. And this was growing in here. And I was going to pull it, but I waited to pull it until today. This is cedar sage. It's a salvia. This over here is cedar sedge, all of this. And I love cedar sedge. If you look, in the winter, it's green. It's great. It's a ground cover. So this is cedar sedge, and this is cedar sage. And all these seeds, every one of these things has a little black seed in it. So it really reseeds. And in the rocks, it's not a good place for a plant like this. So it's, you know, planted itself, and I just finally got around to moving it. But I suspect that next year there will be a couple dozen more that'll have to be pulled before they go to seed. So if you have rocks in your landscape, be careful what you plant nearby or what comes up, so that it's not a maintenance nightmare. And along here, put this down here. Yeah. I'll be flinging this somewhere because I do want cedar sage, but not right there. Over here are more mealy blue sage, another salvia, right? The Mexican bush sage is a salvia. The salvias are great. And you can see where the seeds are going to be dropping. Right in the walkway. So I will be removing these and trying to, I think it's a good idea to like a foot out at least. Don't have anything that, you know, will really reseed because maintenance nightmare. So I'll probably move these somewhere, you know, out yonder, because I do love them. And they're deer proof. Okay. So here are a couple more Sinisos, Texas sage, that I put here for, you know, the evergreen or evergray, actually. And this is an Anacacho orchid tree. Beautiful spring bloomer, white, really, really pretty. Sometimes the deer would leave it alone and then they started nipping it. So I did put the cage around it. You can try things, and then if the deer bother it, then you can cage it. But if they're kind of like this, if definitely the deer want it, you got to cage it, or you'll come out and it'll be just devoured. You know, they'll take a tree and they eat all the ends. And like in the case of a possum holly, it can take like 2-3 years to recover and to grow back. So, you know, when it comes to deer, if you have deer, you need to protect your stuff. Over here is, this is my stand of Lindheimer muley, big muley. This was here. In 20 years, they've multiplied, but it's beautiful. And it's a fall bloomer. It has fronds in the fall. And what I do to clean it up in the spring is I rake it with a hard rake. And I also take, with leather gloves, I'll go down in there and pull out the old growth. It's much prettier to me this way. This is what it looks like when I'm done raking, as opposed to giving it a crew cut, a flat top. Sometimes they never recover from flat tops. I've seen grasses like this that were cut totally flat, and then they've got a few fronds of new growth out of them. Ugly. So I don't recommend slicing them off like that. Except for the Mexican feathergrass. It needs it, but it's a small grass. This one, I like this better. That's the way I do this. Over here is frostweed. There's another one of the red buds that I found little and started growing. This is frostweed, and it is an important nectar plant for the monarchs in the fall. When they come through in the fall, most stuff is done and has shut down. There aren't flowers, and they need nectar to fuel the journey to Mexico. So the things that are blooming when they come through, it's important that there's a lot of them. I have friends that just, you know, they have like 10 acres, 40 acres, and they don't like it. They're eradicating it from, and I'm like, wow, if it's way over there, you know, but anyway, different philosophy. So you do have to corral it because it will spread, but I let it just go in here. And then in the fall, all of these have flowers on them. And I purposely left the stalks just to show you how to clean them up. It's really easy. I go over and I just step on them. And, you know, you can lean down and prune them, but I just step on them. And to get the last year's stalks off, you can just step on them and off they come. That easy. Okay, this is cross vine, and it's an East Texas native, but it does well here. And this is not its season of glory, is what I call it. Early spring, and it is gorgeous. This, and it's going up into the dead juniper. I leave the dead juniper. It's already covered. It has beautiful orange flowers. Look at how much is there. So I'm good with it. Orange, beautiful orange flowers. And I mean covered. It is spectacular, the site. So I planted it, and it's pretty well behaved. You know, it's not like some vines, especially passion vine, non-native, will pop up 30 feet from where you planted it. And so far, I've done well with this.